stand over there. I just, well, that was like a bit.
Hello, darlings. Hi, sorry to interrupt. Thank you for coming. For those of you who just saw the screen block, this is Andrew. He and Robert opened the festival yesterday with their film, and he's going to lead the discussion. This is Jasmine and Adam. They just screened. I will let you guys do all the introductions. And welcome to Chill Girl, who's kicking off the festival, or ending the festival tomorrow with their world premiere. They just flew in from LA. Thank you, Len.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. As Lauren said, my name's Andrew. My name's Andrew Lamb, and I directed the short film called You Belong that screened yesterday. And if I can please ask the two of you to introduce yourself and your piece for the folks particularly watching online who weren't here for the screening. Yeah, take it away.
Of course. My name's Jasmine Dorothy Haefner. My project is 28 is Great, which I wrote and starred in. I ended up directing it, but it was much more of a facility, shooting it fast than wanting to direct it.
Awesome.
Adam Henry Garcia, and my show is Fairytale Fallout. Also, my posture on this stool is, I'm working on it. So.
We can always work on our posture.
Always.
So this screening block, also to mention, included the world premiere of Diva, featuring a friend of NYC Webfest, Joanna Pickering. So a shout out to Joanna, who wasn't able to join us here today. Yes, absolutely. Give a round of applause. So Jasmine, I'll start with you. For 28 is Great. I know from our conversation yesterday that you work with young people. So how did this influence you in creating 28 is Great?
Sure. Well, I originally had the idea to make this film. I made it for my birthday when I turned 28, like a year and a half ago. And the reason I was doing it was because every year on my birthday, I make a list of things that I love to do, and then I just try to do as many as I can in 1 week. And one of them was be on set. We had been in lockdown, and so that was a big part of making the project for me. But I teach children. I teach children how to play chess, and like ages 3 and up. And so, excuse me, what always frustrated me as a teacher was doing all these things. I produce stand-up comedy shows. I've made movies in the past, written plays in the past, but none of them are ever appropriate to show to young children. And not even are they appropriate, but will they understand anything? And so that's one of the reasons I shaped this film the way I did, or at least subconsciously, was so that I could show it to my students. And I actually have students who still ask to see it. I showed one of my students again recently. She was like, I want to see the movie. And I was like, okay, Charlotte, no problem.
And do they laugh at the same things that we as an adult audience today were laughing at?
Mostly it's the funny faces and the eating. They love it. They think the eating is hilarious. I've gotten more questions about how the blue lollipop tasted from kids than any other group of people.
Hilarious. I particularly enjoyed the pants of that character.
Yes. Those are my standing pants. I normally only wear them when I stand at things.
And Adam, flipping over to you, I'm curious, what inspired you to want to hear from these neglected fairy tale characters?
Well, I have 3 kids, and I can vouch for the lollipop being by far the most interesting thing that has maybe ever happened. And to speak to those kids, I have a son named Elliot, and I have twin daughters named Izzy and Phoebe. And we have watched all of the Pixar, Disney, we've read the books, everything. And there are so often characters that are like, hey, that guy's kind of interesting. Oh, no, he's gone. That's it. And it's funny because the sort of seed goes way back. Back when I did theater, I did a scene from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which is the 2 sort of buffoonish characters in Hamlet who deliver the message, right? And Tom Stoppard wrote this play that is just about these 2 kind of jackasses and their experience outside of Hamlet. And I was always like, that is so cool. It's kind of like Wicked. Wicked is a good example of it on a massive scale, where it's like, oh, there's these sort of other stories adjacent to the one that we all sort of know. And I just labored over writing something from the point of view of a henchman in a superhero universe. And it always sort of fell flat, and it seemed right, but I couldn't quite get there. And then with these guys, I think just because fairy tales are so accessible, everybody's got at least 1 or 2 in their back pocket. And it's like, oh yeah, there's definitely some room there to explore. And it seems like also on maybe a slightly pretentious level, there's a voice to people that aren't heard. Even in comedy, I think sometimes comedy can soften the preachiness of certain things, and I think maybe that's also, I know that that's also a motivator, for sure.
Great, thank you for that. And of course, in both pieces, I was struck by the pacing, particularly yours being quite quick, and in the way that you told your story, and yours taking some nice long time where we see B-roll of you walking through the forest. So for both of you, what was it like, how important was pacing for you in creating each of your pieces?
Very. It was, what's interesting about that, I was just realizing this weekend. I'm pretty sure almost word for word, the script is what the final product ended up being. Which is interesting. I wrote it 8 days before we filmed it, and it was like a whole whirlwind. I'm like a whole believer that the theme of the thing that you're making somehow influences the process, for better or for worse, right? I made a film called Zoomers. An uptight mother of two joins her best friends on Zoom for their annual magic mushroom trip.
Oh my god.
And the experience of making it was super trippy. And so with making this, it was like, I think because of the speed of film sets, and also just my inner monologue, having it be fast-paced was like really, really important to me. And when we edited it, it was a 7-page script. It's only a 5-page film.
Wow. And yourself was getting us into those worlds. Is that part of it?
It's funny. Well, I'm primarily a video editor. That is my day job where I hang my hat. And there is something awesome about it. I'm sure a lot of you guys have experienced it, where like once you learn how to edit, you can finish something. Like you can act and stuff, you can write something, but you can actually see it through to the end when you edit. So it's interesting doing it all the time and then doing it with your own stuff, where it's like, ooh, like you have to sort of have that discipline, and there's not a producer, there's not notes necessarily, and it's like, okay. So it's funny, the first one is relatively swift-ish, and then the second one is very sort of like breathy. And I think intentionally the second one with the pixie is, he's immortal. So he's got like all the time. And so it's funny that the runtime for the first one is like 7.5, and then the pixie one is almost double. So it wasn't like a super conscious choice, but watching it today, it's like, oh, okay, I can kind of see why I did that, even if it was sort of an instinct at first, but it seems to make sense.
Yeah, and I think it drew us in, right, and sort of took us into the world of each of these characters. It just struck me, the pacing, and even the pacing of the other two pieces that were in this screening block as well. So for you, Jasmine, I have one more question for each of them, and I'm going to throw it over to you to see if there's any questions from those of you who were part of the audience here in the screening block. Playing into these roles, of course, looked like it was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun watching you do it. What were the biggest challenges for you in playing and filming all the parts?
The biggest challenge in playing all the parts? The costume changes. I've said this already, but we filmed it in 10 hours. It was supposed to be 8, but we went 2 hours over, which for the filmmakers in the room, no, that's like a very, very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it came to, there's 2 answers, right? There's like the functional answer, which is how do we film this so that I can minimize the amount of costume changes I have to do, because each character had a different costume, but also different makeup. Some of them had different nails. Right, so like the level of time that we spent changing was significant. But then additionally, because we filmed it so quickly after I wrote it, and I spent those 8 days doing like literally just pre-production work, I hadn't like practiced anything until the day that we filmed it.
Right, of course.
And so I had to really rely on my training as an actor, and that. It's so funny, I'm really gracious because we've been nominated for 2 awards, acting awards in this festival, but I don't feel like the acting it's certainly not how I would perform now. And if I have to go back and do it again, I think I've just spent like a month working on the characters and then film it.
Right, and really, but the specificity of each of those characters really was quite clear.
Yeah.
And the shifts and the changes were quite fantastic, I have to say.
Thank you so much. I'll plug the Malmgren Technique of Character Transformation and Movement Psychology, which is what I've studied for a long time. It's the only way I could do what I did so quickly.
Amazing. Well, there you go, nice little tip for our audience.
Yeah.
Adam, of course, what struck me is the dark comedy take on exploring these characters. Chip on their shoulder, not necessarily a happy ending. What were the challenges for you in writing and acting these characters that you were creating out of nowhere?
they're all such bummers. They're not particularly happy. They didn't get swept off in the pumpkin chariot at the end, But I do think it's funny. I don't know if it's like the giant eyebrows or what, but from when I was younger, I was always sort of the bad guy. In elementary school, I played Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, and it's one my mom will never let me forget. But it's one of those things where it's like, the villains are always the most compelling. And these are not necessarily villains, but they're definitely flawed. And there is something about fairy tales, and I don't know, you can maybe extrapolate into like American Dream territory, where it's like, it's just perfect. It's like, maybe it's not, and that's okay. And we can sort of live in these worlds where people get enchanted into kitchen objects, and it sucks, as opposed to it being like delightful, where we all synchronize our music and our kick line. I think also for the pixie, I've been wanting to dye my hair blonde since I was like 12. And I would do like the crappy, get it at the store and it's orange, like I have an 11th grade photo with that horrible hair. And this was pro, and I was very happy for like 2 months with this hair. Just sidebar.
It did look fantastic.
It
really did.
Thank you.
So I'll open it up just in case there's anyone who has a question. Lauren will.
Hi. So, both of you and Marina, who was in the block earlier, are nominated for host and solo performance. And so I know you sort of just touched on it with the question now, but if you could just talk about being on camera and it's just you're not playing off another character.
I guess I'll talk about the one shot in the film, the twofer in the film, where there's two Jasmines in one shot, which actually is a fairly old filmmaking technique. It was invented in the early 2000s. I think Marina, did you use that similar? Yeah, exactly. Shoot flat, right? Anyway, so, but the thing is that the person who stands in as my body double, Junia, who is also co-producer for me, she sat where my eye line was. And the craziest thing about this project, and then looking at the film that we had in post-production, was realizing that I had done it well enough that we could just take 2 shots and merge them together without having to cut anything out. And that was really cool for me. And it also made me realize that it's fun to do my own writing because I am just hearing the voices in my head. It sounds crazy when I say it like that. But it was difficult, but very fulfilling.
Yeah, I would agree. I like the technique where it's like flat and you can't cross the middle line, but you can get so close and it looks. I think initially it's like mine are like just sort of large monologues, which was sort of like the bane of life in college, where it's like, oh God, why is this so long? But also there was something, because I have an agent and it's always sort of like hit and miss, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with some of that, and it's like, oh God, what is this part? Like, it's fine and it's cool and it's an opportunity, but sometimes it's like, this is so boring. And these are sort of weird and dark and flawed. And also, as a half Puerto Rican, half Scandinavian guy from Jersey, I can play a Cockney dude, and no one's going to cast me in that, right? So it's like, okay, I wrote myself 7 pages, that's a bit of a bear, but I'm super into it because nobody else is going to give me this chance,
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes, over here.
For Jasmine, 28 is great, and both I found the short film Diva was really addressing etiquette on set. And one thing I'll say, first of all, to Joanna, who's not here, but I know she'll be watching, I says, just thank you for talking about the importance of an intimacy director on set. I think that's definitely, if people are having those kind of things in their films that they're filming, that is a valuable resource.
Jamie, that's taught classes at the festival. That's what she does now. She's a professional intimacy.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, she's doing really well.
Oh, great. Well, it's important. I'm glad that that's the wave of the future with film, I hope. But can you talk to me how much your experiences on different sets may have inspired how you approach some of these different characters that you were playing?
Yeah, a lot of them are loosely based off of people that I've worked with on set before, especially the boom operator. I'm always shocked that the person who does sound is like the quietest person. I guess it makes sense because I'm tired of hearing loud voices. But I've slightly lost my train of thought. So, etiquette on set. I just kind of wrote it this way because I knew the world, but in a way, all the characters, what the film is actually about is ego, and the characters are all struggling with ego or not struggling with ego in a specific way. And one of the things that's always been so curious for me about sets is the intimacy with which the people interact with each other, because you're there for 12 hours a day, because you're there 5 or 6 days a week. You really end up knowing people for better or for worse, and trying to figure out how to navigate these very interesting environments where people who don't work in the creative performative arts,
Right.
they don't enter these spaces where it's like, and now this actor, like I understand why the actor is mad. I get it, right? Like this, they're cutting out part of her performance because it just doesn't work with the director's vision, but then where's the creativity for the actor? And the director's like, literally my job is just to craft the film. All I want to do is frame the shot the way I want to frame it, right? So I guess the etiquette on set, it's a really nice structure to play around with. It's nice to have that kind of bolster it up and then play with it up and down.
Well, and even leaning into some of the sort of stereotypical ideas that we have of these roles on set, I felt that they still felt grounded, because they were fighting, probably because of their ego, for what they needed.
Oh, I've met that DP. Definitely.
Yes, right down here.
Adam, for Fantasy Fallout, or yes, I got it. No, Fairytale Fallout, excuse me. I'm there.
I made that mistake too. I have 2 folders on my computer. One says fantasy.
It's such a visual piece, from the way that both episodes kind of had different visual styles for how the kind of drawings that take us through the unique stories are, to how the backdrops.
Places we trespassed on, yes.
Yes, exactly. But they're so beautiful. I just wondered if you could speak to kind of your process on visually how to present these stories.
That's very generous, thank you. I worked with a guy named Michael Fisher, who is sort of just DP extraordinaire. He studied in New York, he lives in Vermont, and he just has this incredible eye, and he will not settle. And it's funny because it's small budget, it's basically the 2 of us sort of wearing all the hats, but he still won't settle. When I'm like, this is fine, he's like, it's definitely not fine, and here's why. And it's like, okay, cool, like that sort of like sunset, sunrise shot where I'm walking in sort of silhouette and the title Forkman comes up. Like that was so specifically at a time where he was just like, nope, we need to do it at this time in front of this weird tree. And I'm like, okay. So I had sort of written and, memorized all my stuff, but I have to absolutely tip the cap to him in terms of the visuals. I was super adamant about that skate park with all of the cool paintings and everything, because I clearly grew up in the 90s. Love skateboarding, still try to do it. My kids, sort of laugh at me, but I don't totally embarrass myself. And I was like, I need to work this in. I need to do this while I'm still upright on camera. So it's like, there's this beautiful sort of, and it's funny, you find these spots where you're like, wow, there's some like beauty in this space. And it wasn't like a super exhaustive process to find locations, but every once in a while, we did go to like 4 skate parks in Vermont, and there was just this one that had all of this color. I was like, that's it, that's the one. I'll just lean against this random ramp. There's like an active construction site like 20 feet away, and we'll just do takes in between because this ramp is cool enough. I don't want to do it in front of a boring brown ramp. I want to do it in front of this colorful ramp. So yeah, like Mike, I guess all that to say, Michael sort of got me into getting into that idea with him, that it's like, oh no, this looks fine, this is suitable, but this over here, which will take another 4 hours, and we'll have to only come here at 6 a.m, will be much better. And this is a sort of new page for me, under his guidance, I think, to be honest, that settling is okay because you have the vision, but you can make it better even without like the big bucks. So yeah, that was definitely a learning experience for me.
Yeah, it's amazing how we take things away from each project that we work on that we didn't necessarily know would be the case going into them.
For sure.
Any other questions, comments? Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for joining us here in the room, and I want to just give an opportunity, of course, to both of our creators. Please share with us here in the room and at home where we can watch more of your work and find you online.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Jasmine Dorothy Haefner. You can find my website at Jasmine, spelled like the flower, Dorothy, like the girl from the movie.com, or on Instagram, which I more reliably update at the Jasmine Dorothy.
I'm Adam Henry Garcia. My show is at fairytalefallout.com. Straight up episodes is fairytalefalloutseries.com. My Instagram is just me and my kids mostly. So you don't have to go there.
That sounds really entertaining.
I mean, it's delightful. But and then yeah, I guess if you want to see me act, I was in The Tick on Amazon, and I've been in some other sort of random, like you run the New York Gauntlet. I've never done Law and Order, but I was on Blue Bloods. So anyway, that's it.
And I'll just add, if you'd like to know a little bit more about myself, you can follow Gay AF Comedy on Instagram, and you can check out our film. We'll probably be posting there, You Belong. You can check that out as well. Thank you again for joining us here in the room, and thank you for watching at home.
Thank you so much.